My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm 35, born and raised in a coastal town where people still talk about bloodlines like it's the 1800s. My mother, Judith Caldwell, is one of those people. I married Harper Evans 10 years ago. Small-town girl. No degree. No pedigree. Just grit in her spine and ambition that scared people who had never worked for anything. To my mother, she was uneducated trash. She said it at our wedding loud enough for the caterer to hear. She said it at Sunday dinners. At Christmas brunch. Even the night Harper got featured on the cover of a business magazine. And I stayed quiet. Smiled tight. Told myself Judith didn't mean it. Until the night Harper finally stood up. We were seated at my parents' dining table, guests in formal wear, wine glasses catching the chandelier light, when Judith looked Harper dead in the eye and said, "Some people are born to marry up." Harper didn't flinch. She set down her fork, wiped her mouth with the cloth napkin, and said calmly, "Some people are born to be pitted." Then she stood, walked out, left her plate, her purse, her ring. She didn't cry, didn't look back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know whose silence was louder, hers or mine. My mother didn't believe in shouting. Judith Caldwell destroyed people with smiles and subtlety. At our engagement dinner, she handed Harper a book titled Modern Manners for Young Wives. Smiled sweetly. Just a little something to help her adjust. Harper thanked her. I laughed awkwardly. Nobody said anything. That became the pattern. At our wedding, Judith toasted us with a crystal flute in hand and said, "Here's to unexpected matches." Love doesn't always follow logic. Everyone laughed. Except Harper. She looked right at me. And I looked away. Judith had money, reputation, and a Rolodex of friends who measured people by last names and lunch clubs. Harper came from a trailer outside Durham, worked nights through community college, and used YouTube tutorials to teach herself e-commerce. Judith never asked about Harper's work, but she told her once, "There's no shame in trying, dear, even if it never amounts to anything." Harper smiled, didn't answer. That's how she fought quietly. When her online business made its first $100,000, Judith said, "Let's hope it's not a scam." When it hit 1 million, Harper sent her a Christmas card. No message, just a screenshot of the balance. Judith never acknowledged it. But the next time we hosted Thanksgiving, she walked through our door and said, "Oh, it's smaller than I imagined from the photos." Harper laughed. Not politely, not warmly. And for the first time, Judith blinked. People think silence is neutral. It's not. It's a choice. A vote. And for years, mine said, she's on her own. Every time Judith took a jab, Harper looked at me. Not with anger, just expectation. Like maybe this time I'd say something. Draw a line. Remind my mother she wasn't the queen of the house. I never did. At first, I told myself I was keeping the peace. Family tension, tradition, you know the drill. She doesn't mean it, I'd say. Or worse, just ignore her. But Harper wasn't asking for a war. She was asking for a partner. And I gave her a statue. One Christmas, Judith gave Harper a gift bag labeled "To help with the basics." Inside, a cookbook, drugstore makeup, and a note that said, "Presentation matters." Harper excused herself from the table. I followed and stood in the hallway outside the bathroom. I didn't knock, didn't speak, just waited until she came back out, face calm, lips glossed. She sat, ate dessert. I laughed at one of Judith's stories. That night, Harper didn't speak a word on the drive home. But I'll never forget the way she looked out the window, like the silence in the car was louder than any insult my mother ever said. It took me years to admit it. The real betrayal wasn't Judith. It was me. Judith planned it like a victory parade. Anniversary dinner for us, but hosted at her house. 12 guests. Linen napkins. Her signature smirk. When Harper stepped into the dining room, Judith smiled like a cat with feathers on its breath. "Look at you," she said. "All dressed up for once." Laughter. Not from me, but enough from around the table to make Harper pause. She sat beside me. Said nothing. The first course arrived. Judith was in rare form, telling stories Harper wasn't part of, quoting articles she knew Harper hadn't read. A guest complimented Harper's company, called her a self-made woman. Judith cut in before Harper could answer. "Well, self-made is generous," she said, swirling her wine. She had Ethan's support. Every eye turned to me. I lifted my glass. And drank. Harper's chair scraped back. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough to hush the room. She stood, placed her napkin neatly on the plate, and looked directly at Judith. Her voice? Calm. Flat. "I came here to keep the peace. But peace without respect isn't peace. It's performance. And I'm done performing." No one moved. Not even me. Then she looked at me, not with anger, but finality. I hope for your sake, Ethan, you figure out who you are when no one's scripting it for you. And she walked out. I didn't follow. Not yet. The door closed behind her like a verdict. No yelling. No storming. Just the quiet thud of someone done being humiliated. Judith cleared her throat. Well, that was dramatic. A few guests chuckled nervously. Someone reached for the butter dish. I sat there stone still, hearing nothing. My wife had just left me. Not legally. Not officially. But something final happened at that table and everyone felt it. I drove home alone an hour later. Her closet was half empty. Not ransacked, curated. Like she'd planned it. A suitcase gone. Her laptop. 2 framed photos. On the kitchen counter sat my wedding ring. Not hers, mine. With a note beneath it. It read, "You can keep pretending you're neutral. Or you can choose the life you want. But you don't get both." I stared at it for a long time. My phone buzzed. Judith. I didn't answer. Then Harper's name lit up the screen. Just one text. I'm safe. I'm in Hawaii. I don't want to be found. I want to be respected. That was it. No anger. No accusations. Just a boundary drawn with surgical precision. And for the first time in our marriage, I couldn't hide behind excuses. I'd been quiet so long, I forgot what a voice even sounded like. But now, I'd either find mine or lose her for good. She didn't go to a friend's. Didn't run home to her parents. Harper flew to Maui. Oceanfront cottage. No itinerary. No contact. Just distance. From Judith. From me. From the version of herself who smiled through venom just to keep the peace. I saw glimpses of it on Instagram, sunset shots, black coffee on a porch, her laptop open beside a view of the waves. No captions. No tags. Just a woman at peace. And me? I was still in the house where my mother's insults once echoed louder than my voice. The house Harper turned into a home, then walked away from. I kept replaying her words from that dinner. I hope for your sake, Ethan, you figure out who you are when no one's scripting it for you. It haunted me. Because the truth was, I didn't know who I was without Judith's expectations weighing on my every move. She dictated my schools, my career, even the color of my suits. And I let her. Harper didn't just walk away from me. She walked away from the version of me I refused to outgrow. A week later, she emailed not to talk, but to outline logistics. Access to joint accounts, passwords, bills. It wasn't cruel. It was business. Her side of the closet stayed empty. But she left one thing behind in the drawer by our bed, a copy of her first business plan. The one I never read. It was underlined at the top. No one will take me seriously until I do. She did. And now I had to ask myself the same question. Did I want to be someone she could come back to? Or someone she finally outgrew? When Harper left, Judith didn't panic. She hosted brunch. Told the neighbors Harper was on a wellness retreat as if leaving your husband and flying 4,000 miles away was just a spa weekend. She'll come to her senses, Judith said over eggs and mimosas. Women like that always do. Women like that. She meant Harper. Poor. Unpolished. Uninvited. She didn't get it. Harper hadn't left in anger, she left in clarity. Judith, though, didn't take silence well. So she escalated. 1 week later, she came by my office. Unannounced. Lipstick perfect. Smile rehearsed. Your absence from the family dinner circuit is being noticed, she said, sitting without being asked. I stared at her. What do you want, mother? To help, she said. You need to get ahead of this. Of what? She leaned in, lowered her voice like she was letting me in on state secrets. She's building a narrative. The independent woman who escaped. That plays well these days. I blinked. This isn't a media campaign, Judith. Everything's a campaign, Ethan. I stood up. She didn't move. Harper's not the problem, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Then what is? And for the first time in my life, I said it out loud. You. Judith laughed. Quiet. Cold. You think that little girl can survive without you? She already is. She stood slowly. Gathered her purse. Walked to the door. Before she left, she turned to me with a smile that had razors behind it. If you choose her, you lose us. Then she walked out. And for the first time, I didn't want to follow. I used to think choices were moments. Clean. Quick. A fork in the road. But turns out they're slow. Cumulative. 100 tiny silences that stack until they collapse under their own weight. I stared at my phone for an hour before calling her. Not Judith. Harper. She picked up on the third ring. Calm. Not cold. Just, done. I'm not calling to apologize, I said. She didn't answer. I'm calling because I finally see it. Still nothing. All those dinners. All the times I let her say things that would have gotten a stranger kicked out of our house, and I let it slide. I thought I was keeping the peace, but really? I was keeping my comfort. Silence. I kept going. You build a life from nothing, Harper. And I stood next to you quietly while people treated you like an accessory. Finally, she spoke. Why now, Ethan? Her voice wasn't angry. It was exhausted. Because I'm not calling from my mother's house, I said. I moved out. That landed. I'm staying at the cabin, I added. The one you wanted to renovate. You were right about everything. I just didn't want to see it because it meant I'd have to become someone new. And that scared the hell out of me. Another long pause. Then, you don't get points for waking up late. I know. But you do get a choice, she said. And then she hung up. No drama. No promises. Just the space for me to either grow or go. The cabin was cold. No central heat, no Wi-Fi, just silence and unfinished drywall, the project I never let her start because my mother called it unnecessary. Said we had real homes to worry about. Funny how I finally came here to feel something real. The man who moved into that cabin wasn't a husband. He was a placeholder. A peacekeeper. A polished extension of his mother's expectations. I stared at the face in the mirror, my face, and couldn't help but ask. Who would I be without her voice in my ear? And more importantly, without Harper's strength by my side? I found her old notes in a box. Designs for the cabin. Mood boards. Quotes about independence taped next to color palettes. She'd seen something here. In this place. In me. And I had buried it under Judith's comfort. I made a list. Not resolutions. Just truths. I let my mother talk to my wife like she was beneath her. I told myself it was love, but it was fear. I wanted peace more than I wanted partnership. I broke something not with an affair, but with indifference. Harper didn't leave me. She freed herself. I took off my watch, the one Judith gave me when I joined her firm, and dropped it in the fireplace. Watched it melt. That man, the polished son, the agreeable husband, the corporate clone, he burned with it. What rose in his place wasn't finished. But he was mine. And the next move wouldn't come from guilt. It would come from clarity. When Harper finally agreed to meet, it wasn't in a restaurant. It was on her terms. Ocean breeze, bare feet, morning coffee in hand. She sat on the porch of her rented bungalow in Maui, hair pulled back, skin glowing with the kind of peace that only comes when you stop begging for approval. I flew 12 hours for 10 minutes. That's what she gave me. I'm not here for apologies, she said, not unkindly. I'm here to hear the terms. I blinked. Terms? She nodded. Calm. Professional. This wasn't a reunion. It was a negotiation. If we ever speak again, these are the conditions. She handed me a folded page. Typed. Numbered. Titled. What I will no longer tolerate. No more dinners where silence is the price of admission. No more pretending your mother is harmless. No more excuses disguised as tradition. No more apologies without action. No more protecting comfort at the cost of truth. I read each line like it was a verdict. Because it was. This isn't revenge, she said. I don't want you to grovel. I just want to know if you've actually changed or if you're just afraid to lose me. I looked at her. Not as a wife. As a force. I left your silence, Ethan. I won't walk back into it. That's when I realized. She wasn't asking to come home. She was giving me one last chance. To earn a seat in the life she built without me. It was 6 months later when Judith showed up at our door. Not unannounced. Invited. By Harper. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was an audit. We'd moved oceanfront property bought with Harper's company funds. I'd taken a leave from the firm, sold the family stocks, started working freelance. Judith stepped into the house like she was walking into enemy territory. Her eyes scanned the living room. No family portraits. No heirlooms. Just clean lines, warm wood, and Harper, calm, composed, barefoot in her own kitchen. Thank you for coming, Harper said, handing her a cup of tea. Have a seat. Judith did, stiff as marble. I suppose you want some kind of closure, she said. Harper shook her head. No. I want clarity. She sat across from her, level, steady. No raised voice. Just truth with a pulse. For years, you treated me like a charity case, Harper said. And I stayed quiet. For Ethan. For peace. For the illusion of family. Judith started to speak, but Harper raised a hand. Not rude, firm. But the silence is over. And you're not here to apologize. You're here because the power shifted and you're wondering how it happened. Judith blinked. Once. I didn't win because I screamed louder. I won because I stopped needing you to like me. I stood in the doorway listening. Not rescuing. Not translating. Just witnessing. Judith looked down. For the first time in my life, she looked small. Harper stood. You're welcome in this house, she said. But insults don't live here anymore. And neither does your control. Judith didn't answer. She just sipped her tea. And said nothing. For once, her silence was the most honest thing in the room. We didn't renew vows. We didn't post beach selfies with captions about second chances. We just started over, like people who understood exactly what had been broken. Because it wasn't love that failed us. It was protection. I hadn't protected her. Not from my mother. Not from the weight of my silence. And now? That was the only vow I was allowed to make again, to protect Harper even from the version of myself that once stood between us. We live differently now. There's a wall calendar with Harper's launch dates, investor calls, and international conferences. And beneath it? A smaller one for my projects. No more pretending her world orbits mine. Some nights we eat dinner on the floor. No guests. No linen napkins. Just music playing, barefoot conversations, and the quiet understanding that we've both buried the people we used to be. She told me once right before sleep took her. I don't need you to fight for me. I need you to fight with me. I held her hand, thinking about how many years I wasted trying to please everyone but her. Judith hasn't returned. Not since the tea. She sends holiday cards now. Signed but never personalized. Harper doesn't reply. She doesn't need to. Because silence for her isn't surrender anymore. It's choice. And me? I'm still learning. Still unlearning. Still building a kind of man that doesn't shrink next to a powerful woman but rises with her. There are things Harper never said out loud. Like how many times she rehearsed her lines in the mirror before dinner at my mother's house. How often she sat in the car outside, wiping mascara streaks and psyching herself up to smile. She never told me how it felt the night Judith compared her to an ambitious stray who'd lucked into a warm bed. Or how it felt when I laughed. Not because I agreed, just because I didn't know how else to survive the moment. That's the cruelty of silence. It doesn't hit like a slap. It erodes like wind on stone. By the time she left, it wasn't sudden. It was overdue. What she never said was that she gave me 100 chances to choose her. Every dinner. Every insult. Every glance that begged me to say something, anything. I thought I had time. But grace isn't endless. And respect? It doesn't beg. I found one of her old notebooks recently tucked in a moving box I never finished unpacking. Inside was a single page torn at the edge. It read, I didn't leave because he didn't love me. I left because he wouldn't defend me. I sat with that line for an hour. She had already written the ending before either of us admitted the story was broken. But what she never said became exactly what I needed to hear. Because now finally I was listening. She left without slamming the door. No dramatic farewell. No monologue. Just a woman who knew her worth and decided not to explain it anymore. People think walking away is weakness. But Harper? She walked away like someone who'd spent years holding the weight of other people's comfort until she finally set it down. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She just outgrew the table she was once grateful to sit at. Judith used to joke that Harper was lucky to marry into the Caldwell family. Yeah? Judith stands in our kitchen, Harper's kitchen, framed by ocean light and silence so thick you could slice it with a wine key. She came uninvited. Again. I watched as Harper offered her a glass of water. Polite. Neutral. Judith took it with both hands, but not a single word came out of her mouth. Because what do you say to the woman you call trash? When she's now the one who owns the house, signs the checks, sets the rules. Harper didn't gloat. She didn't remind Judith of every insult or humiliation. She just smiled, soft but solid, and turned to the window. As if to say, this isn't revenge. This is reality. She doesn't raise her voice anymore. She doesn't have to. Because when you build an empire from ashes, you don't need to scream to be heard. Most men only realize what they had when it's gone. I was luckier than that. She left, yes, but she didn't leave to punish me. She left to wake me up. And when I opened my eyes, the world looked different. Not smaller, clearer. Harper didn't come back because I begged. She didn't return out of pity or nostalgia. She came back when I caught up. When I stopped being a bystander to my own life and finally became the man I should have been all along. I used to think love was about endurance. About staying. Surviving. Patching cracks in silence. But Harper taught me something better. Love is respect. Action. Boundaries held, not broken. The woman who once stood in a borrowed dress at our wedding smiling through my mother's insults is gone. In her place? A CEO. A woman who signs contracts and walks out of rooms that don't know her value. She didn't lose herself in marriage. I did. And she didn't rescue me. She just stopped making excuses for the man who wouldn't choose her. Yeah? I choose her every day. Not with flowers. Not with promises. But with presence. With spine. With words that don't tremble when challenged. Because I didn't win her back. She let me earn my place beside her again. And that's not a second chance. It's the first time I got it right.